Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to today's tropical weather outlook for Saturday, June 13th, 2026. Today, we're going to be talking about El Nino, as El Nino this past week has now officially been declared by NOAA, and this is a surprise to absolutely nobody, given that we were expecting El Nino here over the last several months since the beginning of the year. And now it is all coming to reality. I'm going to talk about El Nino, how things are shaping up right now, and we're going to look at how El Nino will affect tropical activity, especially in the Pacific here over the next few weeks. And of course, we'll take a look at activity as well in the tropics in the Atlantic as well, in which there is some right now, although development is not likely. But we'll go over that at a later time. But lots to go over today, so let's get started right away. Starting off, sometimes get a little bit ahead of myself, especially since we have so much tabs to go over today. But as we typically do, especially when we talk about El Nino, let's start off by taking a look at the sea surface temperature anomalies right now across the Atlantic and the Pacific. And the Pacific continues to stand out like a sore thumb, with these very, very warm sea surface temperature anomalies here beginning to build along the equatorial Pacific. Widespread shadings of 2 degrees Celsius building here, and especially off the coast of South America, some of these anomalies here already reaching 3 degrees Celsius. In fact, some of these anomalies, truthfully, are reaching the end of the scale, getting all the way up to 5 degrees Celsius. So we are really beginning to see a lot of the warmth here in the Pacific surface now, especially as we get closer to the east here. And this warmth is going to continue to fill in and push to the westward as we continue to get these westerly wind bursts here along the equator. And this El Nino is only going to continue to strengthen. And especially with the warm tropical Pacific as well, all systems are a go for things to really get active here in the Pacific over the next few weeks. But especially with this El Nino here, things continue to warm up. And given that, and we've been in this warming trend for the past several weeks here, I think it's pretty safe to say now that El Nino is official, and that's what the Climate Prediction Center did with their monthly diagnostics discussion that they typically release on a monthly basis. The latest El Nino update, we are now in an El Nino advisory, and they say El Nino conditions are currently present and are expected to strengthen into the Northern Hemisphere winter of 2026 to 2027. And, with that knowledge now, looking back at this sea surface temperature map, I'd say that this is definitely indicative of a sign that we are headed towards, if not already, in an El Nino. And I mean, it's especially obvious given just, again, all of the warmth we have along the equatorial Pacific, and just these anomalies here continue to build. Really almost starting to get to the entire equator here, filling up with anomalies again reaching at least 2 degrees Celsius here. And taking a look at the latest Nino 3.4 average for the sea surface temperature anomalies, with once again the Nino 3.4 region being in between the eastern and central Pacific here. And of course, this is the region that we typically look at when we monitor El Nino. And right now, the latest value is hovering at 1.4 degrees Celsius, almost getting close to 1.5 degrees Celsius right now. And the El Nino threshold the El Nino threshold is at 0.5 degrees Celsius above normal, which we crossed that all the way back in mid-April. So we've been 2 months now with El Nino sea surface temperatures or sea surface temperature anomalies here in the Nino 3.4 above 0.5, which is El Nino threshold. So definitely we are seeing a long-term warming trend here, which makes it safe to say that we are for sure already in an El Nino, and it's only going to continue to get warmer from here on out. But what is especially striking to me is the fact that it is already June 12th, and we are at 1.4 degrees Celsius already. We technically could already qualify for being in a moderate El Nino, to be quite honest with you. and the fact that we are near 1.5 degrees Celsius with our daily sea surface temperature plots here, that means we are even getting close to strong El Nino already. And again, it is only mid-June, and it may not be easy to believe, but we are probably going to see even more warming here occur in the Nino 3.4 over just the next few weeks alone, and I'll show you why in just a moment. But even with the current sea surface temperature anomalies from the latest weekly, values from the Climate Prediction Center, we are also at 0.7 degrees Celsius there, so we are also there above El Nino threshold now. The values here, according to the Climate Prediction Center, for the Nino 3.4 are definitely lagging behind a little bit, compared to these daily values provided to us by cyclonic weather, of course, using the NOAA Coral Reef Watch. So a little bit of a disconnect there, although to be fair, the Climate Prediction Center does use the relative Nino index as well, not the raw sea surface temperature anomalies like this map here, but still 0.7 degrees Celsius above normal. We are above El Nino threshold, and the rest of the ENSO regions here are definitely warming. The Nino 4 already at 0.7 degrees Celsius too. The Nino 3 index, which is generally the Eastern Pacific, that is at 1 degree Celsius above normal, so already at moderate Nino threshold there. And of course, the Nino 1 and 2, which is the region here closer to South America, already achieving, at least according to the latest weekly value, 2 degrees Celsius above normal. So that is that region, again, off the coast of South of America here. And it's certainly not hard to believe as to why we are already at 2 degrees Celsius in terms of the average in that region. I mean, we're already at super El Nino threshold in the 1 and 2 region here in the Pacific. And is certainly indicative of the strength of El Nino that is definitely going to soon catch up in the rest of the ENSO regions here as well. So quite a strong event beginning to unfold. And that is also indicated as well by the June forecast of the Climate Prediction Center strength for ENSO. And this graph here shows the probability of how strong of an event we might have. And you've been hearing the talk for the past several months of the models showing potentially a very strong super El Nino. In fact, some models are even showing potentially one of the strongest El Ninos on record this year, if not the strongest El Nino on record. The Climate Prediction Center is now beginning to reflect those models. So, it's all coming together here, especially with the latest June outlook. As we get towards the end of the year here, first of all, I got to point out, for sure, we are definitely going to be in an El Nino, especially for, very importantly, August, September, October, the three peak months of the hurricane season in the Atlantic. We are pretty much at a 100% chance of El Nino happening, and already by the time we get to the peak of the hurricane season, already seeing potentially up to a 70% chance here that we will at least be in strong El Nino conditions. But by the time we get to October, November, December, by the time we get to the end of the year this year and into the winter, the Climate Prediction Center indicating up to a 60% chance of reaching very strong, or in other words, super El Nino conditions right now. And I'd say that these percentages are more than likely going to rise in the coming months as El Nino continues to strengthen here, and eventually we are probably going to be at 100%, because I think it is very likely that we will achieve super El Nino strength this year. And by the way, all of these values are based off of the relative Nino index as well, so it does not even account for the raw sea surface temperature anomalies we are very likely going to see. And strengthening of this El Nino will continue here over the next few weeks, reflected here by the velocity potential chart from the European. You can see in the Pacific here, a lot of these greens beginning to show up, especially as we get towards the end of the month. This is a classic signature of conditions beginning to really respond here like an El Nino, when we have lots of rising motion and a very strong MJO pulse in the atmosphere in the Pacific. Obviously, this will help with keep atmospheric conditions responding like an El Nino, and it'll especially help as well with continuing strong westerly wind anomalies too, which is what we need to help continue the warmth in the Pacific. And you could actually see that reflected here over the next several days, according to the zonal wind anomaly forecast. I believe this is the GFS though, but still, you can see even just over the next few days here, ongoing right now, actually, to be honest with you, we already have yet another strong westerly wind burst here occurring in the Pacific. We have one that's especially strong here in the Western Pacific, or a strong burst here happening there right now. And these strong westerly wind anomalies, not only are they going to help strengthen El Nino, but they're also going to continue to help with tropical activity as well. And I'll show you that here in just a moment. But rising motion really coming into play here over the next few weeks. And this forecast takes us all the way out till the very end of July. So this is definitely a long-range weekly forecast, but it indicates rising motion, long-term rising motion associated with really strong El Nino conditions really beginning to set up here. That's probably going to continue to help these westerly wind anomalies, and we're probably going to see some even more stronger westerly wind anomalies set up here in the Pacific over the next few weeks, and that's going to help continue to bring to the surface all of the subsurface warmth here in the equator. And obviously this is probably part of the biggest reason why we are especially going to see an El Nino of the magnitude that we are likely going to see. Just take a look at how much warmth we have here in the subsurface. Again, with these anomalies here, many of them reaching the top, third or fourth, or this scale is pretty large, so like the top 20% of the scale here, and we still see quite a few anomalies here in the Eastern Pacific, especially now that a lot of this warmth, due to the last several weeks of persistent westerly wind bursts we've had here along the Pacific, obviously continuing to help set up this El Nino. We've seen a lot of these warm anomalies continue to surface here in the Eastern Pacific, and surprisingly, we still have a lot of these anomalies here reaching the very, very top end of the scale, 6 to even some areas still seeing as much as 7 degrees Celsius in sea surface temperature anomalies above normal. And this is going to act like rocket fuel for this El Nino, and we are just going to continue to see things strengthen here with the El Nino over the next few weeks, and we are more than likely, in my opinion, at this point, headed for a super El Nino event. And it's especially certain, in my opinion, now that we are really starting to see the Climate Prediction Center too reflect that chance as well. So it's no longer just going to be climate models that are being posted online indicating that potential. We are really starting to see it now happen in real time. And once again, this is only going to continue to strengthen here over the next few weeks. And taking a look at the SOI too, a huge indicator that not only are we seeing El Nino respond oceanically, but atmospherically as well, because the SOI is a measure of pressure patterns in the Pacific, and obviously that's a huge indicator of, especially if we have lower than normal pressures across the Pacific, and, because of that we have a negative SOI, which we have right now, but it also kind of helps us give us an idea of the trade wind pattern in the Pacific as well. So in general, the SOI being a really good indicator of how, ENSO is playing out atmospherically, and the current SOI average of the last 30 days already now down to negative 21 points, and the daily contribution here at negative 30 points. And let me show you the daily contribution values over the last several weeks here, going all the way back to May. Now, we've been consistently seeing some really, really strong negative SOI values here. Today's value alone at negative 30, but even yesterday, negative 29, and especially, the first week of June here, the last week of May, even then, we had quite powerful negative SOI values here, and this obviously continues to help tank the average. And the lower this gets, the more El Nino is going to continue to be reflected in the atmosphere. So again, all systems to go here for El Nino in the Pacific. And given all of that, it is especially being reflected now in tropical activity as well over the next few weeks here. This is the Climate Prediction Center Tropics Hazards Outlook. And you can see here as we close out the month of June, next week, the Climate Prediction Center indicating multiple areas of potential development here, tropics-wise in the Pacific. And especially as we get towards the end of June here, things really become more active, especially in the Eastern Pacific here. And I'll show you how that looks like with the ensembles in just a second. In fact, that's the ensembles right now, but I'll get to that in a second here. But the Climate Prediction Center in the Pacific, especially the Eastern Pacific, up to a 60% chance of development here. And this is at week 3. So they are clearly confident that something is going to really pop out in the Pacific here. And then in the Western Pacific as well, we have some pretty decent chances. Likely, potentially that will give birth to maybe a strong typhoon here in the next week or two. And I'll show you that here in just a second here. But all of this telling me, again, that El Nino conditions are really beginning to come into play. And El Nino is beginning to ramp up. And we are going to continue, as that happens, we are going to continue to see activity here in the tropics ramp up in the Pacific. And again, that's being reflected very strongly in the ensembles. And here's a look at the European ensembles over the next 2 weeks here. Some activity right now happening in the Pacific, as you can see with some of these ensembles here. And actually, some of those ensembles are actually associated with the remnants of Amanda, if you remember that storm from about a week or two ago. So the remnants of it are still out there, and it looks like a few of the European ensembles are picking up on it, although I'm not sure if it's very likely we will see development, although I'll show you the National Hurricane Center in a little bit. They do actually have a chance for development, but again, especially look here closer to Mexico and in the tropics here in the Pacific, especially as we get towards the 10 to 15 day time frame here over the next 2 weeks, we really start to see the ensembles become, once again, aggressive on activity, really ramping up here in the Eastern Pacific, and then in the Western Pacific as well, happening sooner. In fact, there's already an invest out there in the Pacific right now, and eventually here over the next few days, it's going to track off to the west-northwest, and as we get towards next week, and especially towards the end of next week, we might see this potentially strengthen here into a strong, maybe even yet another super typhoon in the Western Pacific here. And a lot of the ensembles are definitely indicating quite a few strong outcomes. So the chance for another very strong to potentially super typhoon is there. We'll obviously watch and see if this has any potential threats to land. Some of the ensembles are trying to bring this close to Japan. Others are curving this out to sea, so obviously there's a lot of uncertainty as to whether or not we're going to get impacts and, of course, what exactly is going to happen here. But the ensembles, long range for both basins, really beginning to pick up on a lot of activity, and that makes perfect sense, especially when you look at how everything is coming together here, conditions-wise, in the atmosphere over the next few weeks. And, of course, that is also especially going to help amplify our El Nino. And taking a look at the GFS operational as well here, the 12Z run now fully loaded, so we could take a look and see what it shows in the next few weeks. And you can see over the next few days here, well, first of all, in the western portions of the Eastern Pacific here, you do see that there is some vorticity that tries to spin up, some of it associated with the remnants of Amanda, but that ends up kind of just going on off here and kind of dissipates. But over the next week, especially as we get towards at least 5 days out, you can already start seeing some vorticity here beginning to spin up. Definitely a closed low-level center and vorticity tightening here, and that goes into Mexico. So we'll also maybe potentially have to watch for more impacts to land here in the Pacific over the next week. But then especially here, look, as we get towards the 7 to 10 day time frame, the GFS really starts going all in on the Pacific. And as I take the model out even further than that, you can see that the GFS really gets aggressive here on activity in the Pacific. But it all kind of relates to each other. I mean, the ensembles are showing quite a bit happening here in the Pacific. Well, that's the Western Pacific. But in the Eastern Pacific here, especially in that 10 to 15 day time frame, things really begin to wake up. I mean, we are going to have the atmospheric conditions for it, especially as we get towards around the late month time frame here. That's when we are really going to start seeing that rising motion concentrate once again in the Pacific. And this is only going to continue to fuel El Nino, and of course help fuel activity here in the Pacific, in the Eastern Pacific, as well as potentially activity as well in the Western Pacific here. And you could obviously see that reflected by our invest, which is here in the Western Pacific right now. And that strengthens as it moves on off to the west-northwest here, and the GFS potentially indicating that this will become a very strong storm here. Clearly gets down to 930 millibars on the day 7 time frame, and probably strengthens even further beyond that. And obviously we will see what implications this storm will have on activity and potential threats to land here in the Pacific over the next week. But something is definitely coming, and it is absolutely a reflection of all of the overall patterns here in the Pacific becoming more and more favorable as El Nino continues to strengthen, and will likely become a very strong and potentially historically strong event here over the next several months. Taking a look at activity, though, right now in the tropics in the Atlantic, obviously we are watching for potential development in the Gulf. We've been talking about this over the last few days, and this is not very likely to develop. This only has a 20% chance of development in the next 7 days, and 10% chance in the next 48 hours. But this will bring impacts to Texas and Louisiana here. If you've been following me for the last several days, I've been talking about potential heavy rain and flash flooding, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. But really quickly, also looking at the Eastern Pacific as well. And yeah, this is the area here. A low chance, but it's still there. And the National Hurricane Center, on their 8 a.m. advisory, or at least Eastern Time 8 a.m. advisory, they did mention that this was associated with the remnants of Amanda. Looks like they dropped that part here on the latest tropical weather bulletin they released not long ago, but this is associated with the remnants of Amanda. And of course, I showed you the ensembles do indicate something out of this, but not a very high likelihood that this will develop. Only a 10% chance for right now. Here's a satellite shot of how the Atlantic and the Pacific is looking. And let's actually really quickly refresh this to get you up to date. And you can see not much happening right now. Some shower and thunderstorm activity happening here in the Pacific. Obviously, we have our AOI out there to watch, and then we also have some shower and thunderstorm activity in the Bay of Campeche as well, associated with our Gulf disturbance, although you can see here the showers and thunderstorms really looking meager, not really, persistent, definitely not the look of a developing tropical system for sure. And I'll show you here on the GFS over the next day here. Again, most of that moisture and that energy is going to continue to move on off to the northwest here, probably move inland over Mexico by tonight and into overnight tonight and into tomorrow. And then that energy will kind of get, trapped here. Not trapped as in it'll stall, but it'll then get shoved into Mexico here. And then eventually, maybe sometime early next week, depending on what model you look at. The GFS doesn't show it, but I'll show you the European AI here. The AI models, for some reason, unlike the regular global operational models, they do bring the energy into Mexico, but then they try to bring it back out here into the northwestern Gulf. And clearly, the National Hurricane Center is taking that potential scenario into consideration. So will we see development here still in the Gulf? Will there still be a chance for something to happen here in the Atlantic over the next week? We'll see. It's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. Not putting my bets on it per se. But one thing I do want to point out to you, and I've been talking about this quite a bit over the last several days, is regardless of development here, whether or not something actually is able to get going, there will be a flood threat for northern Mexico and the Texas and Louisiana Gulf Coast here, probably stretching into the central Gulf Coast as well for Mississippi and Alabama. And as you can see here, over the next few days, as the system here moves inland over Mexico, lots of moisture will be streaming in from the Bay of Campeche into northern Mexico here as we close out the weekend. And then as a frontal system moves on off to the eastward, a lot of that moisture is going to get lifted northward and strung out all throughout the southeast U.S. here, stretching all the way from northern Mexico through Texas and potentially up into the Carolinas, especially as we get towards Monday and Tuesday and even into Wednesday here. And that's obviously going to result in quite a bit of rain. And taking this out over the next week here, yeah, that's definitely quite a bit of rain here. Many pockets along the Texas coast here, especially southern Texas, the GFS indicating potentially up to half a foot of rain, even portions of inland Texas as well, and stretching into Louisiana and Mississippi too. The GFS indicating quite a bit of rain, potentially once again up to, if not even more, than half a foot. And of course, all of that rainfall is going to be a huge issue for flooding. And the Weather Prediction Center is highlighting that here over the next several days. Their day 3 outlook for the rainfall, or at least for flash flooding, they have a slight risk of potential flash flooding and excessive rainfall, stretching again through Texas and Louisiana and across the Gulf Coast here. And that lasts into day 4, and this is Monday and Tuesday. So heavy rainfall happening regardless. Regardless of whether or not we're going to see development here, there will be impacts, especially in the form of heavy rain and flooding. And those are significant impacts for sure. And that's something that I've been talking about quite a bit, but I want to, write the point home again. Because a lot of people get caught off guard by rainfall and flooding, especially flash flooding. And over the past few years, we've seen time and time again just how much of a surprise flash flooding can be, not just in terms of damage property-wise, but also risks to life. So keep that in mind, especially if you are in Texas and Louisiana over the next several days here, especially as we head into early next week. A flood threat is coming for you, so you'll want to keep your eye out on that. But of course, beyond that, we will watch and see how the tropics evolve here over the next few weeks. But one thing I will tell you for sure is El Nino is here and it's strengthening, and that is definitely going to be reflected tropical activity-wise here, especially in the Pacific, over the next several weeks. And you are definitely going to see how that will all pan out, because it's going to be quite incredible. And I've been talking about it over the last several weeks, and with El Nino as well. We've been talking about it since the beginning of the year, and now it is all becoming reality. With that being said, though, I'm going to wrap it up for today's video. Not much else to go over beyond what we talked about today. So if you enjoyed what you saw today, as always, I appreciate if you would like, comment, and especially subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. And, turn on the notification bell as well, so you can get videos the moment I upload them. Thanks for watching. Make it a great rest of your weekend. And of course, a great rest of your day as well. I will talk to you guys again tomorrow.